The Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brady Batiste, get me the rock. Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Monday, September 29th, 2025, and it's my official duty to welcome you into episode 497 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Welcome back to the podcast. Hopefully you, if you're listening to this and you're wondering where the episode was last week, put it out on social media on Tuesday afternoon. Had really hoped to record something before I had knee surgery on Wednesday. And unfortunately, just with the other stories that I had to write, and it just didn't happen. And so I apologize if you're listening to this and wondering if you missed an episode. You did not. I did not record one last week. I had a couple of basketball stories that needed written before I went in for surgery. Surgery went fine. They had to trim out part of my meniscus and clean up a little bit of stuff in my knee. But I'm back at it. Took a couple days off, feeling pretty good, and excited here to be talking to you and to be getting ready for a busy week. And frankly, busy. Everything's getting busy here soon because as I sit here on Monday, we are 2 days away from Ohio State hosting Media Day. So all 14 members of the men's basketball program will be available for interviews inside Value City Arena, likely in the practice facility. So inside the Jerome Schottenstein Center. It's always the weird distinction. Value City Arena is inside the Jerome Schottenstein Center. So parts of the building that are not the arena are technically the Schottenstein Center. Whatever. Let's not get bogged down in the semantics. But at any rate, that's Wednesday. And so they'll take a team photo, and then everyone will be available for about 45 minutes or so. And we'll have a press conference with Jake Diebler. Ohio State is 1 week into preseason camp. And as of today, 35 days from the season opener. IU Indy at Value City Arena, which is inside the Jerome Schottenstein Center, on November 3rd. So we are 5 weeks from the start of the season. We are 1 week into official preseason practice, and we're 2 days from Ohio State Media Day. And so I will certainly be recording something Wednesday night, post Media Day, breaking down things we learned, breaking down the scene, just trying to bring you into the room. Anyone who's been listening to the podcast for a while or following me for a while knows that Media Day is arguably my busiest day of the year. It's the day where, I try to talk to as many guys as I can in that roughly 45-minute time window. Inevitably, I come out of Media Day with, the goal is roughly a dozen stories. It's a great way to just be a point of contact with a bunch of guys. Any off-season questions that are still kind of lingering, this is the chance to get some answers and to get some insight. And I will be going down some of the things I'm hoping to learn on Media Day here in just a moment. Like I said, it's a whirlwind of a day, and I'm already sitting here trying to plan out which digital recorder do I leave with which player, and how many stories is it reasonable to expect to come out with. And it's interesting this year too, because in the past, Media Day has tended to take place either right at the start of the preseason, if not a day or two before. And it's always provided a convenient out for questions of hey, what have you seen from player X in practice so far? And so I was well, we haven't started yet, so I don't know. And so, if you're wondering how a freshman is looking or how a new guy is looking or whatever, you didn't really get that kind of stuff in a typical year from Media Day because they just haven't done anything yet from an actual preseason practice perspective. That will be different this year. We will get different answers, and we should get some more insight into where things stand because Media Day will be a week and a half into the preseason. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to see what we learn on Wednesday. And that does lead us into the following week, which will be Big Ten Media Day in Chicago. That'll be that Wednesday and Thursday in October. One day is Women's Media Day, one day is Men's Media Day. That's also just a absolute bonkers day of just running around and talking to as many people as possible and trying to get as much information, as many stories. I love these days. They're also a unbelievable amount of work. So I've got a lot that needs to take place here in the next 48 hours before we're going to Ohio State's Media Day, and then the next 9 days until I'm in Chicago getting ready for all that. So yeah, really excited to get this part of the calendar underway. Do want to point you to the two stories that published while I was away. Had a story on Tayson Chapman. Was able to do a sit down with him and go over his journey back to the court, what last year was like, what exactly happened with his knee. It was Alanis Morissette would tell us it was ironic, but maybe that's not the right word. But that story published the day that I was undergoing my knee surgery. So glad that Tayson's doing well. It was a really enjoyable conversation. Whenever I've spoken with him, incredibly polite, incredibly just kind guy to talk to, and definitely a little soft spoken. And so to get a chance to just sit one-on-one for 15 minutes and go over things, I thought I learned a lot about him, and I hope that came across in the reporting. So hopefully you enjoyed that story. If you missed it, you can go find it at dispatch.com. Easiest way to find anything that I've written, just look, like if you click on any of my stories and then you click on my name within the story, it'll take you to a webpage that just has all of my stuff on it. And so it's the easiest way to just see if you've missed a basketball story or something that I've published, that's the best way to go find that. And the other story that I wrote, and I think I've kind of talked at this or around this at various times throughout the offseason, but I wrote a story about why this Ohio State team believes it's going to play faster and why the offense should look different and how that all ties in with this concept of a higher basketball IQ. And I completely respect any degree of skepticism that one might have hearing those things talked about and thinking about what reasonably Ohio State can do differently offensively and how much room there may or may not be to grow from an offensive standpoint. But I thought there was some really interesting stuff in there. And I don't necessarily want to give it all away here on the podcast, because again, these are things that we've kind of talked about in various ways throughout the last several months. So I just encourage you, just go click on that, go give it a read. Would love to hear what you think about it. Would love to hear if you think it's possible, if you're buying it, or if it's just, every coach in the preseason loves their team and every guy's put on 10 pounds of muscle and is in the best shape of their life. And if you think this is all just window dressing, I suppose, let me know. But it feels different to me talking to this team, this coaching staff, about why they think the offense will look different this year and why it won't just be Bruce Thornton dribbling the air out of the ball while waiting for someone to do something. I think we can all agree we've seen plenty of that the last couple of years. So, like I said, we're 1 week into the preseason, 35 days till season opener against IU Indy, November 3rd, Jerome Schottenstein Center, encompassing Value City Arena. Before we get to my thoughts here as we approach Media Day, I want to remind you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review. Please click 5 stars. And as always, please consider telling a friend. Thanks to everyone who's taken the time to do all those things. And thanks to everyone who continues to support the podcast. We're entering a busy time of year, and you're going to be getting lots of podcasts coming your way as things continue to happen. So great time to make sure you're subscribed, and great time to maybe tell a friend who wants to know about Ohio State men's basketball, where they can find it. So what do we want to learn at Media Day? Well, the obvious stuff right off the top of the head is just how healthy is the team? This would be a chance to, talk to Colin White and get the lowdown on his situation, and talk to Josh Ojewuna and get the lowdown on his situation. I'm not necessarily expecting a major development in Josh's status, but you never know. and maybe we'll learn how likely or unlikely it might be for him to return this season, kind of where he is in his progression from that torn ACL suffered last season. Get more of a feel for if he were to be available in February. Does he pursue that? Does he take a red shirt? Like there's a lot of ground, I think, to pursue there. And so certainly curious to get updates on those guys. Curious to talk to Matthew Grujic. Get some more insight from him into how things are going for him. I think I mentioned on here, I did speak to him briefly on the sideline at one of the football games, and he spoke about just how excited he has been to be able to participate after having to watch during the summer. But he did get to play in open gym stuff and play against alumni. So we covered a lot of that ground, but I'm curious to hear from him kind of how this is going and how this compares to other preseasons that he's had. I also expect he's going to generate a fair number of headlines because I just think he is a personality that people are going to gravitate to. And I think he's very relatable and easy to speak with. And I think that's all going to lend itself to a guy who's very easy to write about. So I'm expecting if there's like a, breakout media day star, I think he would be high on the list of candidates there for sure. Cause I think his personality suits himself up well for all that. Next question I'm curious to get some more information on is just how are the battles between Brandon Knoll and Amari Bynum going? Now I have a story that's publishing Tuesday morning at dispatch.com looking at the top position battles that are most interesting to me as this team moves through the preseason. And this is certainly one of them because I think there's a lot of interesting parts here trying to figure out how some of these different pieces fit. And I think you have a guy like Brandon Knoll, who obviously has been in college for a while and spent the last 5 years at Wright State and 2 years of them redshirting, and then has been a prolific scorer every year, has also been a high-level rebounder every year, has really good size and shooting ability for that size. He's going to be an important part on this team. Going to be one of the most experienced players, I think, in all of college basketball. I'd be curious to see where he is from an age standpoint across the spectrum of college basketball this year. But you take all that stuff and then you add in the fact that like playing at Ohio State and like leaving a legacy and making the most of his 1 year opportunity as a native Ohioan, I think all that stuff matters to him at a pretty high level. So there's a lot there that would put him up for a pretty strong season for sure. Especially when you factor in, like, we know that Bruce Thornton, John Mobley, and Devin Royal are going to score a lot, and we've already spoken extensively about the impact I think Christoph Tilley is going to have. They're not going to necessarily need Brandon Knoll to go out and get him 15 a night, but I think he's going to play a significant role on this team. He's going to start when the season begins, I believe. But what does that battle look like with Amari Bynum? Because I've talked about it on the podcast. I saw my friend Timmy Hall over at 97.1 The Fan. He posted something about watching some practice the other day and like telling you to buy stock in Amari Bynum. Everyone who watches him continues to come away impressed. And so what does that battle look like between like the rising freshman who, as I mentioned on, I was on with Connor Lamons on his podcast, the Bucketheads podcast about, we were talking about Amari Bynum, and like I said on there, I said, gravity does not affect Amari Bynum in the same way it seems to affect anybody else in this roster. Would not be surprised if he gets the unofficial fan or player voting for the best dunker on the team. Like he's fun, and he also is not going to be needed to come in and be an immediate 10 to 15 point a game guy like Ohio State's freshmen have had to do for the last several years. There's more of a runway for him to grow. What does that competition look like as the season goes on, and how do they manage that so they get the most out of both of those guys? Interested to get some insight into how that's going early on. I want to know what's being done to get 4 points better. So I was looking at last season and just how many close games this team played. And we certainly covered all that ground during the season. 9 of Ohio State's 32 games were one possession games. That was 28%. But games decided by 3 points or fewer. Ohio State went 4-5 in those games. So in a season with 15 losses, 1/3 of those losses were by 3 points or fewer. So this is probably something I have to flesh out more throughout the course of the preseason, but I want to know what they feel like adds up to those margins. And to that point, I think one of the things I'm curious about is, does having potentially a little more depth and a few more options off the bench, does that create a scenario where Ohio State is maybe 3 or 4 points better over the course of a game? What I mean by that is, you're not going into the under 4 timeout down 1. Maybe you're up 2. Or maybe instead of being up 3, you're up 6 or 7. And then that changes the complexion of those last couple of minutes to where it's not quite so, do or die, I guess. And so if this team can be in a better position in those last couple of minutes to where you're still going to play close games, it's the Big Ten, you're going to have a lot of games that come down to the very end, the last 2-3 minutes. But if you're able to give yourself just a little more breathing room than what you've been able to do the last couple of years, I feel like that's how you could turn like 4-5 into 5-2 or something. And some of those 2 or 3 point games, like a 2-point win becomes a 5-point win, and it's not quite as absolutely knuckle clenching, I guess, down to the last second. And along those lines, then I'm curious to hear, and this might be more like get into a Big Ten Media Day, there's more time, but like self-assessment. One thing that I haven't really talked a lot about with Jake Diebler is just the specific notion of like, what have you self-identified as you've looked back on the last season as room for growth for yourself? Because certainly we can talk about the players and we can talk about the schemes and we can talk, but there's all of this plays a role in it, whether it's who's on the court, what they're being asked to do, and certainly how the coaching is going. And so when you do talk about having such a slim margin for error like this team did last year and losing close games like it did, what kind of self-evaluation process did Jake Diebler go through? Very interested to hopefully get some insight into that as we move through the preseason, because I think that's going to be important especially for a young coach and for a guy who's entering his second year as a full-time coach. And certainly I'm sure is feeling some of the pressure of having not made the tournament his first year. Interested to have some conversations about that. I also want to know what the backup 5 spot looks like. And this was something I know we've talked about on here as well, but I think that Christoph Tilley is unique on this roster because not only does he have the blend of size that he does at 7'1", 240, I believe, off the top of my head. Yeah, so Tilley is 7 foot 240, and Ivan Yagovin is 7'1", 250. So, stat that I found interesting, and I have this in my story for Tuesday, but Christoph Tilley's assist rate at Santa Clara last year was 16.1. And Ohio State has not had a big man with that kind of assist rate since E.J. Liddell, who was at 17.0 in 2021-22. Now, let's call a spade and say that E.J. Liddell as a postman is significantly different than Christoph Tilley as a postman. And EJ's overall just talent and general awesomeness made him into the all Big Ten player that he was and made him such a formidable small ball big man. But Christoph Tilley's a big man. And with his size and with his ability to connect the offense and distribute the ball and make shots and spread the floor and all those things, a lot of that went into the story that I wrote about why this team thinks it will be better offensively. There is not another Christoph Tilley type player on this roster. if they remain big, they go to Ivan Yagovin, who, as we've discussed, has taken steps and I think is a much more serviceable big man than he was a year ago when he got to Ohio State as a freshman. But he's not at the same level that a Christoph Tilly is. Like, I think Tilly could be an all Big Ten type player by the time this season's over. And I've heard from a number of people that his, like, the light bulb of like, this is my last year of college. I'm finally on a high major stage. If I do the things that make me successful, it's going to fit really well with this roster. It's going to help us win, and it's going to make me look good in the process. I think that's all real for him. I think there's a real awareness of that, and I expect him to have a really, really impressive year for Ohio State. Does that mean he can play 30 minutes a game? Does it mean he can get to 26 minutes a game? What does his playing time look like? And when he's not on the court, how much do we see Yagovin? Do we see Ohio State go small? Is this where could Brandon Knoll or Amari Bynum play the 5 in a small ball situation? Like, I'm interested in what that depth chart looks like for Ohio State going into the year, because I think without Tilly on the floor, this team will play differently. Now, maybe that's negated if they do go small, but then they don't have that size advantage that he's going to provide for them. So that's as big of a question mark for me as anything, because again, I just think Tilly's skill set sets him apart from anybody else on this roster. All right, and then the last thing here is just like, is the roster set? We think it's set. It's pretty much been set, but as we've talked about on here, like, they've been trying to get a waiver for Puff Johnson, and Puff Johnson was listed in the Ohio State student directory as enrolled at Ohio State. And I did a search Monday morning, and he is no longer listed. At this point, I don't know if that means anything. I mean, I would think it means something, but I haven't confirmed anything one way or the other. But it has always felt like him getting a waiver was a long shot. And we're now basically into October, and he's still not on the roster. So it would seem to indicate that this team is pretty set. You know, could they maybe add an international guy mid-season? Can someone join in between the window, or in between the quarters, or excuse me, semesters? I still have a mental block with that when it comes to Ohio State. You know, I guess never say never. But I do want to hear a little bit on like how set this roster is, and if there's a chance still that anybody else could be coming to help bolster things. So that's my quick rundown. I will certainly have more thoughts as I start to plan this all out and jot some stuff down here between now and Wednesday. Would encourage you to make sure you visit dispatch.com as we get into Wednesday evening and then the next several days, because like I said, I'll have tons of stuff. The day, like I said, the day that I always look forward to, and I'm really excited to get to that on Wednesday and to make my way around from one table to the next as best as my gimpy knee will allow me. I am moving pretty well, just not super fast yet. So we'll see what that looks like. Two more things here before I wrap this one up. One, because I did see this on Monday morning from CBS's Matt Norlander, but the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas is a November multi-team event where teams that participate and win. I don't know every specific of it, but like, you earn NIL money by participating in this. And there's been real questions nationally about like, how realistic is it that this thing is going to continue to exist down the road, and how big can it realistically get? And like, is this a good business model? And nobody really knows, but it is expanding again. And in 2026, Matt Norlander at CBS reported this morning that Ohio State, or that the Players Era Festival had finalized an agreement with Ohio State to be one of the teams participating next year when it expands. Ohio State was one of a handful of teams that was mentioned. My understanding, at least as of Monday, is that that's not finalized yet. I would not be surprised to see Ohio State end up in that. And I think that almost every school in America would like to be part of that and help raise NIL funds to better the program rather than making speeches and kissing babies and doing all the things you have to do. I'm also interested going forward how the new NIL rules impact whether this is truly a valuable proposition for a team. If the majority of money coming in is going to be from revenue sharing, does that negate the need to raise NIL funds by playing at events like this? We'll see. Again, common talking point throughout the summer. Nobody has any idea when it comes to any of that stuff. So that's what I know as of this point. And I also realized that in the last podcast where I was talking about the schedule and breaking down some of my thoughts, I had teased one thought and then never got back to it because I'm an idiot, which was that the Big Ten tournament will now have all 18 teams, which means that it is expanded out to Tuesday. And the Big Ten now is second only to the Sun Belt for the longest conference tournament. So the Sun Belt, you might have seen this graphic. It's like that flying V. It goes from Tuesday to Monday. The West Coast Conference also goes 6 days with a similar like V-shaped format. Big Ten tournament, and I've not yet, I assume we'll get a bracket when we get closer to Big Ten Media Day, but the coaches pushed for this. No coach wanted to be known as the coach whose team did not make the conference tournament. And there's certainly an argument to be made for every team deserves a chance to play its way into the NCAA tournament. And I'm also sympathetic to the NC State situation where the Wolfpack put together that historic run to win the ACC tournament and make it to the NCAA tournament and then go on that incredible run that they did with Joel Justice on staff, I might add. But I also think we can be realistic about this. And we can say that is, I mean, how many other examples do we have like that in the last 25, 30 years of college basketball? The answer is just straight up not many. Teams don't play on the first day of their conference tournament and then make it all the way to the NCAA tournament. That's just not how this thing works. Yeah, so I had this mixed up in my head a little bit because I was just thinking like, oh, teams that play on the first day of their tournament don't make it to the NCAA tournament like NC State did. And I was like, well, I just for some reason, it's a Monday, got my wires a little crossed, and I was thinking, well, did UConn win its conference tournament when it did what it did and won the 2014 title? And no, UConn won 2 and then lost to Louisville in the Atlantic Coast Conference tournament, and then as a 7th seed, had just an absolutely disgusting run to the national championship game and won that title. So that further backs up the notion that like if you have to play in a conference tournament on Tuesday and the championship game is not until Sunday, and you're a high major team who has played a high major schedule all year, you're not good enough to make the NCAA tournament. It's not going to happen. And we can even just look at like Ohio State a couple years ago, making the Big Ten tournament semis after opening on the Wednesday of the Big Ten tournament. Win Wednesday, win Thursday, win Friday, and lose on Saturday. That's the longest run a team has ever made it after playing on the opening day of the Big Ten tournament. And that's with it starting on a Wednesday. Go back a day further. What benefit is there for the number 17 team that has proven itself over the course of a 20-game schedule to not be anything remotely close to an NCAA tournament team? Why does that team need to play in front of a couple dozen fans on a Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening? Like, I don't like this. I reject it. I don't like that not every team makes the NCAA or makes the Big Ten tournament, but I also don't like that there's 18 teams and it spans the whole country. Like, if we're working in this current reality and we're saying the conferences are bloated and bigger than ever, explain to me why a team that has to play that will play on a Tuesday of a conference tournament thinks that it has a realistic chance to be cutting down nets on a Sunday. It's just not going to happen. Maybe the Big Ten needs to change its bracket. I've drawn up a couple of concept ideas. I know they want to protect the multiple or double buys where possible for the obviously the higher seeds, and that certainly creates some interesting situations as well. So if you're going to prioritize keeping the double buys, there's no other way to do it, and I don't think you need to penalize the top 4 teams because now you're letting 18, 17, and 16 into the tournament. I just think it stinks. I don't like it. Keep it at 15 or find a way to make it start on a Wednesday. But nobody's going Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Nobody's winning 6 games in 6 days in a conference like the Big Ten. It's just, I reject this. So that's my rant. And that's probably a good place to end this one. So thanks to everyone for listening. And again, sorry for missing out last week. Just had too much to write and ran out of time and had to get some sleep on Tuesday night because it was a very early wake up for Wednesday surgery. But thanks for the well wishes. I heard from quite a few of you as well, and that is very much appreciated. So as always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardyddispatch.com. Thanks again for listening. I'll be back with you on Wednesday night. So look for that Thursday. So until then, be kind, take care, visit dispatch.com, and we'll talk soon.